Tak ada ke have not
The
tak ada ke have not gone through the notes lagi ke, or you are like super confident?
Belum ada soalan lagi, Doktor.
Belum ada soalan ya. So tak apa. I think I will just briefly look back at the notes and I will briefly just touch on it so that at least they provide you like a refresher lah. Okay, so and then we'll end the class with some Q&A. Kalau tak ada, then we just end the class je. Okay, so today will be just like a brief what do we call it? Refresher basically. Okay, so if you have revised, or if you have started revising, okay, so your first chapter would consist of introduction to management. Okay, so there will be two parts of management here. Okay, so part one and also part two. So part one will basically talk about general management concept. Okay, so we have touched on what is work and so on. So that one is itulah. Tapi importantly, you will need to know that the functions of management. Okay, so you need to know that management, the functionalities of management. Okay, so this is basic when we talk about management. Okay, so planning, organizing, leading, controlling. So which theories has actually talked about this? Okay, so can anyone basically mention here the functions that we currently use? Okay, planning, organizing, leading, controlling stem from or rooted back from which theories? Who is the theorist who actually mentioned about this management function? Ingat tak?
classical theories by Frederick Taylor.
Sure ke? About planning, organizing, leading, controlling. Are you sure? Classical theory, yes. Classical theory ada dua kan? Is it right? Classical theory? Why you guys? Okay. Satu ialah Frederick Taylor, right? So who talked about scientific management, betul?
Henry Fayol.
Henry Fayol. Okay, so actually planning, organizing, leading, controlling ni is started from Henry Fayol, who talked about the administrative theory tu, administrative management. So the difference between scientific and administrative, scientific is very much to improve the work. Okay, so dia very much to improve the task, and then once you dah identify that is the best way, the most optimum way to conduct a certain job, you inform that to the workers, find the right worker to do it exactly like what you have actually researched upon. Okay, so that's scientific. Dia guna science to improve the work. Okay, so meaning to say that a lot of experimental work. So you would see that they would need to measure the activities, the time. Okay, so how long will it take to actually conduct bricklaying? So position. So several positions being tried, and what are the time? So time is one thing which is as an essence in the scientific theory too. Okay, and scientific theory by Frederick Taylor. And if you can recall scientific theory, there are 5 principles to it. Okay, and then Henry Fayol pula, he did actually establish benda ni. Planning, directing is similar to this, cuma the words or the vocab being used slightly different. Okay, so but still is stem from Henry Fayol, the basic management ni, from administrative theory. Okay, so administrative theory is about improving the organization, improving how the organization, the management actually works. Okay, so that's where you can see the other 14 principles too. Okay, so how to manage the organization to ensure that um, is a success. Okay, so basically to provide proper wages, to have proper organizational structure, to actually centralize um, in a proper order. So those are on Henry Fayol. Okay, so yang ni goes back to Henry Fayol. Okay, so management banyak about getting things done through people. Okay, so I think this one is pretty straightforward lah. Okay, so as manager is pretty straightforward. And rarely that the question would ask you like how to say definition secara betul. You need to understand it. Okay, so it is not definition. Okay. You need to also know, okay, so I think this is some of the important parts of chapter 1, which is effective, okay, efficiency. You need to know as a manager, you need to know whether do you want to be effective, do you want to be efficient, or what do you actually mean by being effective or being efficient. Okay, so effective dengan efficiency dua benda yang berbeza. Okay, so effective is about goal. Okay, so efficiency is about how well you actually achieve your goal, or how optimized you are utilizing the resources. Okay, so two different benda, effective and efficiency. Okay, so it is important for us to know because as a manager, you ultimately you want to achieve your goal with efficiency. Okay, cuma sometimes we are trying to achieve the goal that much, tapi kita disregard efficiency. We disregard to fully optimize the resources. Or sometimes we berjimat, okay, so we try to squeeze in, fully utilize the efficiency, tapi you give way to the effectiveness. Goal tak achieve. Okay, so obviously the best is to get the most effective and efficient lah. Okay, so obviously this quadrant here will tell you that. Okay, so obviously we want something that in terms of goal is high achievement in goal and good resource utilization. We are both effective and also efficient. Okay, and other than that, besides the performance of the project, we also emphasize on the work quality of life. Okay, so you need to also look into the people working for you. Okay, so these are some of the elements that we need to take into consideration when we treat people. Okay, so for this one, which part of the second part of introduction to management it relates to? This part of it. So which theories does this more or less relate to? Fair pay, provide safe and healthy working environment. So which theories that actually did slightly talk about all of this?
Elton Mayo.
Elton Mayer, okay. Ada sikit, but there is a theorist who might be more accurate. Elton Mayer, yes. Okay, so I would agree with you as well. So it can be Elton Mayer, especially here, protection of individual rights. Okay, so Elton Mayer actually starts or signal the realization about social environment. Okay, so about individual rights. Okay, so before Elton Mayer, okay, which means semasa Taylor and semasa Henry Fayol, workers are not allowed to have social association. So trade union, they call it trade union. So they are not allowed to have certain trade union that actually fight for their right. Okay, but after Elton Mayer, basically they realized that social stand is important, and social environment is important for the workers. Hence, they started allowing this what do you call trade union. Okay, so ada sikit kat sini. Okay, if you can still recall towards the mid or almost end part of the chapter, we have something called Maslow's hierarchy. Okay, so big part of it basically it is covered under Maslow's hierarchy. Okay, so Maslow's hierarchy, they would have a hierarchy. Okay, so if you look into the notes, you will have the triangle part, whereby the bottom or the motivation for workers, okay, or the motivation for us to actually in a work situation. Okay, so usually we start our work for the salary. Okay, so the salary is for us to pay for our house, our rental, our food, our clothing, and so on. So basically our physiological needs lah. Okay, so our motivation first is to earn so that we can have all those roof on top of our head. Okay, so fair pay or adequate pay being given. Okay, so second layer of Maslow's hierarchy, once we have addressed the physical or physiological requirement and also basic needs for us to live, usually we will go for safety. Okay, so the second layer ialah safe. Okay, so safe and healthy working environment. The third layer of the hierarchy is basically in terms of belonging. Okay, so kat sini tak ada belonging. So the third layer of the Maslow's hierarchy is about belonging, where the organization could provide an environment where people could feel belonging. Okay, so you rasa macam you belong to the organization. Tak adalah you go on to work and then you are just a lone ranger kat sana and no one is talking to you and the environment is very toxic. So as an organization, it's important for the organization to create an environment which is harmonious. Okay, so not toxic. So basically, third is a sense of belonging. Fourth is basically the given responsibility. Okay, so acknowledgement, responsibility. Okay, so opportunity to learn. Okay, room to grow. So semua ni on the fourth. Okay, so pride in the work, pride in the organization. Okay, and the top one is self-actualization. So self-actualization is where you are in a situation that you are no longer expecting the organization to give you. You are in that point, at that successful point whereby you giving back to the organization. Macam kerja philanthropist. Okay, so for example, Bill Gates, for example, and then Jack Ma. So they reach a point whereby there are no longer like attached to an organization. Okay, so it is very much about you realize your two and you can give back to the organization. Okay, so basically it relates to Maslow's hierarchy lah kat sini. Okay. Okay, so managers challenge. Okay, so obviously it is not easy being a manager. Okay, because you are accountable to your boss and you are dependent on your subordinate. Okay, so you are here whereby you are answerable to the boss. Okay, so the accountability in delivering your boss vision, your boss goal, and so on. At the same time, it's a huge challenge because what is tasked upon you needs to be conducted by your subordinate. you can't just your boss task you yang buat, tak boleh lah. So it's impossible. The task is not one man show. So the difficulty or challenges is basically when you depend on your subordinate. Okay, so in order for you to actually be accountable and answerable, the dependency is huge. Okay, so you need to balance that very well. Okay, so that is the challenge lah sebenarnya, because you are in the middle. So you kena jawab di sana, you kena make sure they are doing as what you have requested in order for you to answer here. That's why sometimes, right, as a manager, middle ni, sometimes you are stuck. Okay, so you're kind of in the middle, stuck because expectation is as such, but sometimes the expectation is so high that you feel too bad to actually place it on your subordinate. Yeah, sometimes you are in that situation lah. Okay, so not easy, but that should be balanced. Okay, so these are the 4 functions of management: planning, organizing, leading, controlling, and the additional staffing. Okay, so I guess this one you should be able to know lah what is planning, organizing, leading, controlling. So what it actually means. Okay, so what does controlling mean? Janganlah when asked the question about controlling, you answer what is meant in leading. Okay, so you need to know what are the differences. Okay, so management level, normal, you have top manager, middle, first line manager. Okay, so, and then the skills which are required. So you need to know the difference. Okay, so technical skill tu apa? People skill, conceptual skill, what are those skills? What does it even mean? Okay, so these skills are very different from each other. And that's why the attainment by the managerial position tu berbeza. Okay, so technical skills are mostly required by non-managerial or a lower level of manager. Okay, so and conceptual skill pula different. Okay, so you need to know that. Yang ni managers of position and the roles that need to be played by a manager. Okay, so this one I think we have done in the quiz form juga. Okay, and similar skills of the managers and so on. Okay, so you need to know the difference too. All right, so that's on first part. Second part of it is basically on the theories. Okay, so you need to know what stems or what are the contents of classical human relation theories. Okay, so classical are scientific, administrative. Okay, so you need to know a little bit on what Taylor has done, how how basically this theory functions. Okay, so it is based on scientific. There are time elements here to ensure that we can find the best way, the fastest, the most optimal way in conducting a certain work. Okay, so the principles of management, scientific management. Okay, Henry Fayol, on the other hand, it is about administration. It is about management, top management. How does top management need to manage or need to administrate to ensure that the workers are doing the job? Okay, so the first to identify the 4 functions of management. Okay, and then also Henry Fayol talks about principles. Okay, so there are several principles here. So, do you need me to explain any of the principles or you understand all of the principles here? Okay, faham all the principles here, 14 principles? All right, so the next theories is basically Elton Mayer. Okay, so Elton Mayer is the researcher who actually identified Houghton effect. Okay, so I think I've talked about this. Houghton effect is basically the result or the findings from an experiment conducted in a factory, okay, in Houghton. right? So this is where they discover that social entity is important, okay? And they need to have informal organization, and work groups affect productivity. If you had a team productive workers together, then the result will be good, and you have a negative workers together, that will create toxicity and so on. Okay, so next, Douglas McGregor is about XY theory. Okay, so I think this is pretty straightforward. Theory X is about everything negative. Okay, but this is what they think about floor workers. Okay, so especially masa those days. Okay, so floor workers, it is perceived by the managers that this is how they behave. Okay, and then you have the opposite side of the floor workers. Okay, theory Y, whereby the managerial positions and they are perceived as such. Okay, so they are on the positive note lah, basically. Okay, and a combination of theory Y and also Japanese philosophy or Japanese theory is theory Z. Okay, so theory Z is by William Auchi, and it combines the best of theory Y and Japanese. Okay, so and when we talk about Japanese theory, very important, you can see the words such as freedom, the words such as trust, okay, and the words such as loyalty. Okay, so loyalty, basically, it will turn into long-term employment. Okay, so that's important when we talk about Japanese. Okay, so first of all, the organization or the Japanese administration will provide freedom to the workers, freedom and trust the workers. So they will be given responsibility, and the workers will be compelled. And basically, they would earn the trust of the workers in return. And basically, it will be written in the form of loyalty lah. Okay, so normally, if someone is happy with an organization, sometimes it's not only about the salary. Okay, let's say the salary is towards one point is okay, and the employer is respectful, and given all of this, normally the return from the workers will be loyalty. And loyalty would result in long-term employment, and that will reduce the turnover in an organization. Normally, organization, they don't want huge turnover because leceh, you have to train the workers again if you have high turnover. So if with this, the workers have already been trained, and ongoingly, it will provide a good they would be able to brush up their skill and to get better and better at it. Okay, so this is only the difference between theory X, Y, and Z. Okay, just in a summary form. So this was what I mentioned just now about Maslow. Okay, so Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It starts from biological, physiological until self-actualization. Okay, so the motivation starts usually begins from the bottom, and slowly we will strive for more towards the top. Okay, all right, so that's on chapter 1, part 2. Okay, so chapter 2 is about okay, so chapter 2 is about history of project management. So I think this topic is, let's see. Okay, it starts talking about the history sikit. Okay, and then much of it, when we talk about modern project management, it goes back to the planning of a military. Okay, so whereby Henry Gunn came out with charts. Henry Gunn, basically the Gunn chart lah. Okay, so in order to manage war. Okay, so the history, modern project management history around 1950s. Okay, and then PMI as well. Okay, so Project Management Institute is a huge establishment when we talk about project management, because this institute is the one which actually expand the knowledge and come out with this one. This document is very important for project management because it is like guide. Okay, so that's the guide for us to conduct management. Doesn't mean industry project. Okay, it's not necessarily for construction. It can be anything, but so long it's a project, then this guidebook could be used. Okay, so other than that, okay, so just generally, what is project management? A project, okay, so you need to know what is a project because it is closely associated with construction. Okay, so you need to know what is a project, what are the examples of a project, okay, so and what is not a project juga. Okay, so characteristic of a project. Okay, so a project is temporary. There is a start end date. Okay, so temporary structure. So if you look into a construction, that is a project. So the characteristics of a construction reflects a project. Okay, so objectives of project management, basically to meet the objective, the resources, and it's a mechanism to monitor. Okay, so these are just okay, so this is important as well. So you need to know the trade-off. Okay, so you need to know what are the common the triangle that we are talking about and how each variable affects each other. Okay, so if you increase the scope, what would it result in? Okay, so and life cycles. Okay, so project life cycle as well. Okay, so what is the common or what's the main stages of a project life cycle? Okay, so concept, definition, planning, execution, close out. Okay, problems, okay, and benefits. So I think that one is okay. Okay, so the next chapter would be project management in Malaysia. Okay, so project management in Malaysia, it is a very straightforward topic. Okay, so for project management in Malaysia, basically, I think this one is pretty straightforward lah. So this is the common terms that we used in construction. How construction actually behaves, or how wood construction is in Malaysia. Okay, so the GDP, and we are one of the lowest, if not the lowest GDP contributor. So now it's around 4 to 6%. Okay, GDP, probably you can just briefly just have a read about it. Okay, so just briefly. Okay, you need to know basically project management institute in Malaysia. You need to know actually PMI. Okay, so how does PMI assist project management? Okay, and what are the challenges? Okay, in the current construction. Okay, so what are the challenges? And what are the strategies that have been put in place as well? And what are the challenges faced by the stakeholders as well? Okay, so you need to, when you're answering this kind of question, you need to look from the perspective of each of the stakeholder. So jangan pakai pukul rata je. So every stakeholder might be different, the challenges. So you need to actually relate closely to the stakeholder. Okay, so these are the common challenges in Malaysian construction. Okay, and these are some of the strategies that have been identified to improve Malaysian construction. Okay, So practically chapter 3 is pretty straightforward. Okay, so that will be for chapter 3. And the last one will be chapter 4, which is project definition. Okay, so I think this one should be still fresh in your mind. Basically, for project definition, the outcome of it will be project charter. Okay, and in a project charter, you would need to answer several questions, which results in certain elements. Okay, so the elements in a project charter. So, and a project charter, you need to remember that it is at the front end of a project. Okay, so whereby this is like a working paper. Okay, so without project charter, you cannot have a consolidated, agreed upon way forward. Okay, so it's like it's not legally binding, but at least it's a consensual document that gets everyone on board and agree to this. Okay, this is the way forward. And then baru the project manager will be able to plan and to look at other activities to proceed with the project. Before you can sign off the project charter, you cannot conduct other things because there is no consensus among the stakeholders. Okay, so project charter is like the first official document lah. Okay, so it authorizes the project. Okay, and among the elements that you might have in a project charter are these. Okay, so you need to include your aims, your objective. You need to identify the potential risks. You need to have contextual factors or any assumptions that could give that could arise or that could give way to your project. Okay, so deliverables, what would be the outcome of your project? Okay, so evaluation, or we call it success criteria. Okay, so what would the client associate as being a project to be successful? Okay, so success criteria. So you need to ascertain this so that at the end of the day, we address the success criteria so that the project could be said as successful. Okay, so you might also include funding, where you will be getting the resources, particularly if the project would have this require some specialized resources, then it is very important to specify that. Okay, funding as well. And of course, if an organization is having any guiding principle, or if is having any principle and it needs to be spelled out. Okay, so it can be any principle. Okay, so it can be an organization that only caters or only employs local. So that is a principle by the organization or the client that you need to spell out. Okay, so these are some of it lah. Okay, so I think this one, it should be still fresh in your mind because this one we have done it last week. Okay, so these are some of the elements of project definition that you may incorporate. And of course, your project charter, you need to have the authority. Okay, so it needs to be signed off by the stakeholder and it needs to provide authority to someone. Okay, so it should be named that project manager siapa. Okay, so it provides authority to that project manager in conducting future works from there. Okay, so key stakeholders, you have the goal, priorities. Okay, so scope of the work, the requirements, any assumptions that you might need to note, constraints, project risks, outcome, cost estimation, and if there are any changes and how the process would be. Okay, so success criteria. Okay, so these are some of the items. So if you don't have project charter, you need to have it. So if no, the project would be done or you will be blindly done. Okay, so you need to have that. So if you don't have it, then you need to establish that beforehand. Okay. All right. So I will open up to the class. Any question that you have? Tak ada ya? Okay, so if tak ada, I assume everyone understood and basically clear, and by right markah should be high lah. Kalau tak ada soalan, maksudnya sepatutnya should be pretty clear about that and you get a good marks for it. Okay, so my advice, make sure that you read the questions carefully and read every options carefully. So make sure that if there are statement, accept, and so on, make sure that you understand the question carefully. Okay, so jangan terburu-buru, nampak je jawapan tu and just get it. So make sure that you evaluate your options and think carefully before you answer the questions. Okay? All right. So if there are no questions, maybe we can end the class today. I will provide the recording for tomorrow's class later. Okay, so the recording is basically on we continue the lecture on project planning. Okay, so if there are questions, then you could just text me and so on in regards to the test. Okay, so with that, I think we'll end the class today, and thank you for attending.
Thank you,
All right,
Doctor.
Prof. Thank you,
Thank
Prof.
you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.